So the BBC have joined the debate on e-bike usage with a current programme on their Panorama series. I'm joined today by the rest of the team here to discuss this really interesting programme. We have Simon and Jake, who you're familiar with, and we're joined by Hannah as well, who's currently studying a PhD in e-bike technology. So you've got something to say around this subject. I'm guessing if you watch this podcast, you've probably seen the BBC Panorama. If you haven't, we'll link it down below. It's definitely worth watching. This is our sort of commentary on it from Insider. What I really felt was missing was it didn't really speak to anyone on the positive side. They didn't really speak to anyone, bike shop owners, who have got another opinion to add. So that's what we're going to try and add for that to you today. I'm going to start the conversation going. We've got 3 points I want to talk through. The first point, I want to talk about the overall connotations. I felt the entire report started off fairly negative. Would you probably agree?
Well, first of all, I think it's a good thing that we're talking about the subject. So I'll take that as a positive as opposed to a negative. Definitely, they could have been presented in a more kind of comprehensive, all-encompassing way, but it did focus on particular issues. But the fact we're talking about e-bikes and the pros and cons of e-bikes is a positive thing from my point of view.
Yeah, the discussion has got to be had, right?
Absolutely.
We spent some time in London. We're like rural lights, aren't we? And we went down to London recently, and I was actually astonished by all those lime bikes literally just littered on the pavement. And I can kind of see the problem. Absolutely. You probably haven't seen that so much up here because e-bikes up here are very much,
It's definitely more, the particular subject that we're covering, it was definitely more of a city problem, particularly with all the delivery drivers that are delivering all the fast foods, etc., using e-bikes as a way of, basically being as fast as they can to get paid as much as they can effectively. And that's part of the challenge with
It is an incredible growing industry, not just in terms of getting your food delivered, but actually, when I was down in Manchester last, I could see these massive groups of people waiting for these calls to come in to go and do their deliveries. But also, other people were there repairing them. There's like a little backstreet garage of people soldering batteries together and doing like backstreet repairs and stuff, like repairs that we can't do as bike shops. As all happens, like a little micro economy around it as well.
Wouldn't want to do.
Or wouldn't want to do. Yeah. So, coming back to the negative, I felt like it always concentrated on 2 things. One, focused on the accidents that were happening. There was lots of repeated footage of e-bikes having accidents with pedestrians, and lots of focus on people breaking the law.
Yeah, there's a lot of shock content there, I would say.
Yeah. And I don't think it really focused on the positives. And for me, that should be reduced car traffic.
Yeah.
And hopefully that everyone can agree watching this, if you don't, that reduced car traffic good, whether it's environmental or whether it's just sheer congestion, that's got to be.
Yeah, that's definitely a plus. And getting more people out using bikes, that wouldn't use bikes otherwise, it's got to be a plus from my point of view.
And the flexibility, that didn't get mentioned. When we looked at those busy streets in Oxford, and she mentioned how it's a medieval city, one of the easiest way to get final mile deliveries in a tight, narrow road network is using an electric delivery bike instead of a big transit van.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you got to think. They focused on that scene, didn't they, when there was an electric bike parked outside a restaurant? Yeah, but if that was a van...
Yeah, how much more,
Well, how many times have you seen vans rip off onto a pavement, causing chaos for all the traffic, causing chaos for the pedestrians, the dangerous things that go with that, And
that's the fundamental thing, isn't it? Used well,
correct.
The e-bikes can be of real benefit in a city.
So maybe it could have been one of those things. What would you rather have? 6 e-bikes parked outside a delivery space or 6 cars? What would you rather?
10 white vans.
In this scene, that would definitely seem to be missing. So, what do you think, Jake? What was your take as sort of being a younger person watching this?
Yeah, I think it's obviously it's not a problem that pertains to us specifically from where we live and the experience we have with e-bikes. We see a lot more positive experience with e-bikes, with people using them to get out and exercise when they not necessarily wouldn't, or people who can't ride a normal bike and stuff like that. There's a lot of positive stuff that we see from that. And it was, I felt like it was a very negative review of e-bikes and didn't present really any positives to it in terms of, as you say, that reduced car traffic. I think would be a really big one for people, even if you don't, bloody cyclists, people don't like bikes. But if there's more people on bikes, the fact is there's less cars on the road.
Yeah.
And that I think that's a massive positive for everyone. Whether it's, as you say, even if it's just you can get somewhere faster in your car because someone else has chosen to take that journey by bike. And that's something that's completely ignored because it has such a massive focus on the illegal e-bikes, which I think it is a really small margin of the actual kind of community of e-bikes and usage of e-bikes, is that sort of illegal segment, but I think that a really, really interesting point that they brought up was the fact that you can buy illegal e-bikes on the Cycle to Work scheme. I was,
Jake, you and I do a lot of sales on the Cycle to Work scheme, and that horrified me. I didn't even realize you could do that. The fact that you can do that is I think we could stop that overnight.
Yeah.
If every Cycle to Work scheme just checked what bikes were going on and said yes or no, that would stop that overnight. The fact that we are subsidizing illegal bikes, that's crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
What's interesting actually, because to actually sign up to, you have to be a bike shop. When I thought most of the illegal bikes are actually being brought direct from the factories, or being brought on Amazon, who aren't Cycle to Work dealers. So what dealer out there is actually, first of all, importing electric e-bikes, has the insurance to sell them, because surely they won't be insured to sell them either.
well, you would thought so. But I think there's also a lot to be done on education. You know, I mean, people are buying these bikes, they don't realize what the law is. So for example, we did have one in the shop the other day. The guy bought one in, it was like a monster bike.
Yeah.
But he had no idea that this wasn't road legal, that you'd only be able to really ride it on a field if you had a field to ride it on. So the lack of awareness, lack of education in terms of what is the power of the motor, what is the limit of it, what is the situation in terms of you can have a throttle or etc. The general public, I don't think, really understand that what is legal and what's not legal. So I think there's a big education drive required from my point of
And
view.
that's what came across in the whole of the Panorama episode, was that they tarred all e-bikes with the same brush. So every person on an e-bike must therefore be riding it irresponsibly and riding an illegal bike and completely missing all of the really positive benefits that we see.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it definitely felt like that. Joe, coming back to that bike, what the interesting thing was about that was that the guy had done kind of the right thing. He brought this bike, he came in a box, he didn't know how to put it together. So he brought it to a bike shop. Now, we took one look at it and went, right, it had like an 800 watt motor. It was massively overpowered. It had a throttle which hadn't been deactivated. And it had really inadequate brakes. I mean, they were rubbish and they weren't even working properly. So how it had been shipped, they hadn't done the olives up. So the front brake just didn't work at all, didn't function. The gears weren't working. It was dangerous really out of the box. And, you know, in terms of our insurance, you know, and the trade and standards advice, like we couldn't touch it. We said, I'm really, really sorry. So even though the guy said, look, I brought this thing, can you make it safe? And brought it to someone who can make it safe. We said,
Well, the positive there was he had the foresight to bring it to a bike shop.
Yeah.
And try and do it himself, you know.
and I felt really bad because he's trying to help, but at the same time, if he had an accident on that and we were the last people to touch it, we were, you know, that would potentially bounce back on us. So it's
I mean,
a tough one.
In the UK, correct if I'm wrong, it's 250 watts motor limit. And a lot of these, you know, bikes that come in are having like, you know, 700 watt, 800 watts. I mean, if you think about putting out that kind of power as a regular bike and the speed you'd be traveling at, it's horrendous. I mean,
And that's obviously the reason for the limit is that, in the UK, legally, I believe it's 16 miles an hour is the limit for e-bike assistance. And over that, it cuts out. And I think that's something they didn't really address, to be honest, in the Panorama, is that if you have a normal e-bike, really there isn't anything dangerous. Like we were talking about this before, that if you have a normal cyclist riding through a town or something like that in a cycle lane, chances are they're going to be going faster than that 16 mile an hour limit anyway.
Well, both of you two, probably all of us, have the potential to ride
you
a
obey your speed limit, but yeah, you could obviously potentially be right up to the speed limit on a flat piece of road.
Exactly.
A 30 mile an hour section, a 20 mile an hour section.
There's definitely a debate to be had that 50 miles an hour isn't enough, because back when the channel first started, we got sent an e-bike. In fact, we get lots of emails from various Chinese factories literally sending us e-bikes. In fact, one of the e-bikes just turned up on spec. We didn't even ask for it, just turned up in a box and said, here, review of the channel, great. If you, and like, not touching that with a barge pole, but one of them does actually have the ability to override. And I've tried it, and I'm going to admit to breaking the law here, but it's actually safer because you're just that tiny little bit faster. It only goes up to 20, but that makes so much difference because when you're in like the normal flow of traffic around town, you're suddenly at a very similar speed to everybody, and you're not just being overtaken at every single opportunity. You're almost at the same sort of 25, 30
But
miles an hour.
vulnerable riders, one of the most dangerous positions you can be on the road is at the front of a queue of traffic or trying to get on and off a roundabout. So for people who are a little bit slower, yes, we could worry about them having that additional speed, but also it allows them to clear junctions more quickly and takes them out of vulnerable positions on the road faster.
But I think going back, that's about education as well, I think, because I mean, I remember back in my day, I'm going to show my age. Yeah, we had cycle safety at school. You were taught how to ride a bike and how to ride safely on the lanes. You know, I imagine, and I could be doing a disservice here, that a lot of people that pick up an e-bike or even a regular bike in the city have no education on how to ride safely. I think it was mentioned in the program about the embankment. Have you ever been in London early morning and the flow of bikes on the embankment? It's like the M6. And I think he commented on that point. How do you join that flow, and how do you join it safely? And how do you then, when you want to move out and you want to turn off it, how do you manage all that? There's been very limited education, I think.
There's not enough space, and there's quite high curbs as well. So if you do get bumped, you're into a curb and you're into a dangerous situation. Yeah. In fact, showing our age, actually, we all remember back like in 90s, maybe the late 80s, when you could drive a 50cc moped on a provisional license at 16.
Yeah.
And every sort of pizza shop had like a row of 50cc mopeds outside. That was your first job as a 16-year-old, was to like get on a moped and jump around delivering pizzas on it.
Yeah, because there was no test. You just had that on provisional license.
Yeah.
And that was it. And off you could go. And you could probably go at comparable speeds. I think they probably went and do go at comparable speeds to these e-bikes.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Just difference with a different engine. So it feels like we've gone full circle. We're back here again with a different type of motor potentially. Okay, moving on from that little slightly quietly negative thing. The second thing that really struck me was how the police came across in this, and I did feel like quite sorry for them. I kind of.
I feel like they're a step or two behind, and I think, you know, obviously if they're riding regular bikes as e-bikes, I mean, first of all, I would think they would be on e-bikes personally. You know,
they had e-bikes, but they were capped at the speed limit.
Okay, I don't know.
They were capped, and obviously the guys that they were chasing had throttles and bigger, powerful motors and stuff like that. So it was a bit like a policeman in a Volvo or something trying to chase a sports car down the M6. It was a similar sort of thing, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, you were just chatting before. I mean, so imagine you successfully capture one of these guys or apprehend them. What do you do with their bike then? Do you just stick that bike on the back of your bike, or how do you get it back to base? You know?
I thought it was interesting because, yeah, as you say, we like the show depicts like a police officer on just a regular bike, and it's like if you're an officer in pursuit, they've got a modified BMW that can do 10 times the speed limit, whereas if you're trying to combat someone on an e-bike that can do 30 miles an hour and you have to pedal under your own steam on a hardtail mountain bike ramp, you're going to get pretty fit. You're going to get absolutely smoked. And so they need to be properly equipped to actually deal with if there are things like, as you say, like you can't stop people doing crimes. And if you've got an illegal e-bike that can be used for doing wrong things, people are going to do it. It's the same with cars, same with motorbikes, the same with anything. And so really, it's the police need to be properly equipped to actually be able to tackle the problem rather than just being left with on a completely ill-equipped bike on their own. There's no way they can win.
Yeah, and trained as well. There's a quite an unfortunate segment in there they captured where the actual police rider did something pretty dangerous themselves, to be honest, in pursuit of this. I mean, you could argue they had better training, etc., but it was like, oh, that made me wince a little bit. If you watch the documentary, I'm sure you'll see it. Coming back to your point about, I felt really sorry. If you're a policeman and you've stopped someone with an illegal e-bike, what are you going to do then? You've got to like get on your radio, call your buddy up to come with a van, to come and collect this bike, to take it back to a compound. And in London, like, there's no space, is there? Like, you saw that little compound they had for the bikes. There's no space at all to try and confiscate all their bikes.
And also, the guy's bike that they did seize, he was really upset. He had no idea his bike was illegal. And it did the 16 mile an hour speed limit, but the issue with his was that it had a throttle on, and that's not allowed on an e-bike. You can't have a throttle that just whizzes you up to that speed limit.
So he didn't realize that,
and he didn't know.
Yeah.
And you just feel bad for the guy because he's not been it's not clear to people that.
But that's my point. I think we can do better education. I mean, public service broadcasting in the UK was a thing many years ago. We had like the Green Cross Code and out across the road. There needs to be some more public service education on what is appropriate, what's not appropriate. And then I think, the areas where we could clamp down more is where these bikes jump on and off the pavement, which is clearly bikes aren't on pavements. If there's a dedicated as a cycle lane, yes, but not on a regular pavement. And a lot of bikes just assume they can whiz on the pavement, run along. Or worst case, there was clear areas, pedestrian areas, with no cycling between certain times, and bikes were just blatantly riding.
But again, that's human behaviour, isn't it? That's not the e-bike.
No,
that's not the person riding it. Correct. He's breaking the rules.
Yeah.
But coming back to what we were talking about then about what happens when the police apprehend someone on an illegal e-bike. What do we do when someone brings it back into a shop? we put it back onto them. You know, sorry, sir, this bike's illegal and we can't deal with it.
Get it out of the building. Yeah, it's a fire
Exactly,
hazard.
we have to get it out of the building. But wouldn't it be useful if there was a system for bike shops to report that they'd seen? I mean, we might see more bikes coming in than people do out on the streets.
I mean, the problem we have is when these dangerous e-bikes come in, it's just a clear fire hazard.
Yeah,
we
we
just don't
can't
want it.
control
We
it.
don't want it in the building because, of God's sake, if it caught fire, we would have no insurance payout.
Well, that's a great point, because in the program there was a mention, I can't remember the exact number of terms of deaths by bikes per year in the UK, and that didn't distinguish between a regular bike and an e-bike.
It was somewhere in the region of 150 or so, wasn't it?
Something like that, but there was no differentiation. But I'd be also interested in terms of fires in the home caused by a battery, you know, an issue with an e-bike battery, which can be pretty devastating for a family in a family home, you know, or anybody in a home.
And I think that would be a really key point as well to differentiate between quality, safe and legal e-bikes like Bosch system, Shimano system, Yamaha, whatever it is, that if you buy a crap, overpowered, illegal e-bike with a dangerous battery, it is not only can it be dangerous to ride, they're used to do dangerous things, but it's actually dangerous just to keep in your house. And if we can educate people that these things they're not regulated, like if you buy an illegal one, it's not regulated, it is dangerous, people will probably be steered away from buying them if you can give them that education that actually this isn't safe to have in your house because it's not, and people would be much more likely to then go on your cycle to work scheme and buy a Trek commuting bike that does 16 miles an hour, and that alleviates half your problem.
Yeah, hopefully. I think there's that point, isn't there, where you can't necessarily outlaw them because, I mean, drugs are illegal, but they still get into the country. Like, you know, there's lots of things that are illegal that you can still buy. But in those sort of situations, you punish the misuse of them rather than the ownership of them. Like, you can buy a 200-mile-an-hour sports car. No one's stopping you buying it, a car.
Can buy as long as you don't break the speed limit.
But you get punished for breaking the speed limit. And I think that's probably what is missing. And I think if you can do a lot more education around, what is actually safe, and train bike shops to identify something that's not safe and do something with it. Like, how do we dispose of batteries? If we've got a dangerous battery, we literally can't do anything with it. We can't take it to the skip. We can't keep it here.
Put it in the bin.
Like, all we could do is give it back to the customer.
So your problem.
It's like, you bought it, your problem. So, what? Of course they're going to go and ride it. So it feels like probably when the motor car first came out and there were people walking around with red flags in front of them, you're almost at that stage, aren't we?
I think we was on that.
Maybe. But in terms of it's conceptually, it was like the legislation and the rules and have not caught up.
There's quite a lot of
mandatory flags.
I don't think anybody really predicted how this would surge the way it has and how they're being used.
Yeah.
And that's kind of more the issue, I think, is where they're being used and how they're being used. It wasn't really, that probably wasn't intended when a lot of these designs came out and these bikes were being used. And it's the people, it's the minority that are really affecting for the majority, I think, yeah.
There's some enterprising Chinese factories out there that are going, come on, for e-bikes, make something. Don't worry about whether the wiring's even remotely safe. Just.
But also there's the difference between what you can do with an e-bike in China and what you can do in Europe. They're looking at the research. The research around China and rates of injuries and accidents is very different. What they allow legally in China is very different to the thing.
Tolerances are different.
Oh, really? Interesting.
So, we have to be aware that within Europe, there's different rules for e-bike use and even within different European countries. So when people are making these informed decisions, they need to make them based on the country that they're actually using the bike in, not where it's being imported from.
Well, I think the other key point there, it was, to just touch on the program, is also infrastructure. So in an ideal world, you would be able to have infrastructure segmented by, this is for motor vehicles, this is for pedestrians, this is for bikes and e-bikes. But clearly, a lot of our cities are quite old and it's very hard to then come and implement that infrastructure afterwards. But we are seeing some progress on that. And that's why countries like the Netherlands, having lived in the Netherlands for 3 years, I loved it there because it was really geared towards biking. And I've been there recently. Obviously, e-bikes are used, but again, it's understood that these are the bike lanes. Bikes will be traveling there. So if you're a pedestrian, you're a lot more aware because you understand that is the bike lane.
And they're much more keen on the hierarchy of vulnerability.
Correct.
That if you're a pedestrian, you are the king of the road, and then the bike, and then the car. And one thing I heard on the Panorama video, which really worried me, was the suggestion that e-bikes should be on the road with traffic, which is absolutely wrong. They shouldn't be banned by cycle paths and thrown into the road with motor vehicles.
They shouldn't be on a pavement, but they should be on a cycle.
Exactly.
And if it's only question of pavement or road, then they've got to go on the road.
Yeah.
Clearly, yeah.
But to say that they can't be on the cycle path, which was the suggestion
Yes.
being made,
He's wrong. Yeah.
that they're more like a car than they are like a bike, I feel is wrong. You're not recognising the vulnerability of the person riding the bike if you're thinking that they're more like a car than they are like a bike.
That's such an interesting point, actually, because I think that's probably the one thing. Remember, the Tory government brought in the hierarchy. They changed the highway code to say you can the onus on blame is always on the person in the bigger, more powerful vehicle. So if you hit a pedestrian, it's automatically the driver's fault unless you can prove otherwise. That was a massive change. I don't think we've seen a study yet that come out and seen that go through court or anything.
Yeah, well, it's been pretty recent change, and also I think even when something like that changes, it takes a long time to change behaviour. As rather than, yes, the rules change, but also people have got to adapt to it, learn. And
Oh yeah, people are still completely unaware.
Well, I think
Thing.
the other thing is catching out. Obviously, I ride a bike and I also drive a car, so I can see it from both perspectives. But the one thing I have observed over recent years is generally cycle bikes without any e-bikes are going faster just because of technology, and with e-bikes they're going even faster. The big problem I observe multiple times on the road is that most car drivers underestimate the speed that a bike is traveling at. So, particularly if we're traveling along, so I might be going along an A road here and there's a B road joining from the side, where they would take a chance and pull out, they take ridiculous chances sometimes because they don't recognize how fast the bike is really traveling. If we could be, if this could be a 50-mile-an-hour zone 60, we could be traveling at 40, 50 kilometers an hour. And they pull out and don't really appreciate that. And that's so it's again, it's the education and making awareness that if you've got e-bikes that are traveling at faster speeds, typically drivers have to re-educate and be aware of what could happen. Things are going to happen a lot quicker. That's one of the issues I see quite often.
The scary thing with all that is always that you just see bike at the end of their bonnet, target. They don't actually look beyond the end of their bonnet and look a bit further ahead to see junction, corner, other car coming, etc. Must get past the bike.
Well, that's another one. Oh, yeah, got to get fast overtake. What do I really gain by that? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden they overtake and realise sort of the speed that it's all doing. And annoyingly, what they see is, I don't want to damage my paintwork on my car. I'm going to knock the cyclist into the hedge instead. The vulnerable human being.
another interesting point I thought they brought up, sort of relating to cars, was number plates.
Yeah.
I thought for what we see e-bikes used for, I think that's next to useless. I think for in our demographic, what's the point? People are riding them off road. It doesn't matter. However, I did think that was quite an interesting point for stuff like Deliveroo drivers, is to whether, the Uber Eats, Deliveroo, Just Eat, whatever it is that if there are these sort of things going on where people riding in pedestrian zones and making sort of dangerous moves to try and get their delivery done on time, actually there does need to be a way of keeping people accountable for what they're doing.
Well, I think there is. I think those companies should look at their routes. With AI now, you can just have an AI bot assessing their routes because all that data is tracked. I mean, they're all using mobile phones. Everybody knows where that phone's been. So why wouldn't you have a program that's running quickly, just profiling all those riders and seeing who's ridden the wrong way down a pedestrian area and a pedestrian?
It's very easy for a company to take that responsibility and even to have a rider number on the back of a delivery pack that members of the public could report.
Yeah, why wouldn't you? Because, a lot of vans out there now have, how's my driving? Call this number. So, you have this great big Deliveroo box on the back or Just Eat. Why hasn't it got a number on it? Am I riding safely? Please, call them, flag me up as a good rider, or if I'm not, then flag me up as well.
Oh, yeah, I did think it was funny that they suggested putting number plates on illegal bikes. But not paying attention to the speed limits and the power limits anyway, so why are they going to bother putting a number plate on it?
The number plate thing is always interesting. I think the reason we have number plates, I think one of the reasons is because it's actually quite hard to catch a car. So if you're a police car you can normally read there and then go and find the owner later on. Or a camera can read it and you can go and find the owner. If you can't catch him in that moment, at least you've got the registration and link them to an address. With an e-bike, even a fast e-bike, you should be able to catch them and stop them, and therefore someone should have some identification on them of some description. And that's why I don't think it's so important, but yeah.
And with the line bikes that we talked about, or any kind of share bike, if something happened with one of those bikes, someone's hired it.
Oh, yeah.
And then that's trackable as well. Well, there are lots and lots of ways that you can track illegal behaviour without having a number plate. That seems to be a very old-fashioned fix for a modern problem.
I agree. I think there's so much tech that's being used. Just the fact that someone's got a mobile phone, you should be able to identify a lot of these things. without much manual intervention. I mean, it should all be, AI type tech should be able to flag these things up.
If you can get a speed camera, take a picture of you and then prosecute you, you should be able to go, we recognise that you went down the wrong way street on your Lime bike, here's a fine. It's, there's a lot of data sharing there with Lime having shared.
Or a mistake, who was actually on the bike? Were you? I handed the bike over to this, or I was in the passenger seat in the car. Blah blah blah. Yeah. I mean, yes, but let's start using the data we have. And
it's no different to a hire. If you hire a car and you break the speed limit in a hire car, the hire company gets it, and then they pass the fine on to you, I suppose. So I see that. Oh my God, this has been such an interesting deep conversation. I'm kind of glad that BBC Panorama started it.
It's really important to start the dialogue.
In a mass market kind of way. I think we start it independently in our shops, and in the industry, like bike, beers, etc., is always full of these arguments, isn't it? But I do applaud the BBC for now starting to address it on a bigger scale.
But it'd be great to see something follow up, as we said, where they look at how e-bikes really making a difference, like the work Hannah's doing in terms of, particularly in the third age, and giving people access to areas and activities they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. I mean,
Exactly.
You've seen this in your early research.
Yeah, and there's so many benefits within a city, taking cars off the road, taking delivery vans off the road, and the health benefits of getting people cycling when they might not always be able to, and the commuter benefits. I mean, they did allude to the idea that you can cycle to work and not get sweaty, so that puts cycling in the space that much more people can take it up, and that is good for everyone. And I think that's where the programme for me fell short, was it didn't show the benefits and it didn't give the education that people need to be able to engage with it responsibly.
So we'd be happy to take part in a sequel.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So showing that, you can use an e-bike to get from home to work significantly faster most of the time. Within like a 4 or 5 miles sort of commute, I'd say it's almost faster by bike, especially where I live.
Well, today, for example, it's about -5 outside, and I got a lift in. I live 11 miles away, and it took longer to get here in the car than it would do for me to ride a bike, because there was so much traffic in the town centre. It took 30 minutes to get here from probably 2 miles away.
Yeah.
The bulk of the journey was done. It's just cycling.
When normally you're the cycle path that goes to town and comes straight through. Yeah. Bicycles are the future. You heard it. Absolutely. That's brilliant. So thank you so much for making it this far through the podcast. We are really looking forward to your comments. Please get down there and light this up. Did you watch the Panorama programme? What did you take away from it? What did you like? What irritated you about it? Time to voice your opinion down below. We're really looking forward to seeing it. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate that. Thanks for watching. Take it easy.
Okay.